Hello, everyone, and welcome to Brand 2020. Today is August 1st, 2016. Brand 2020 is our series on Japan's nation branding and how it attempts to portray its image inside Japan to the Japanese citizenry, as well as to nations that trade with Japan and people who are studying Japan like you and me. Dr. Nancy Snow, welcome back.
Thank you so much. It's been a while.
It's August 1st. You can hear the semi in the background just rattling away.
It reminds me of Washington, D.C. They've been underground 17 years, so they have a lot to say. So they're going to be our background noise today.
You've just published a new book. This is your 12th book.
It's actually my 11th, but who's counting?
Okay, well.
Except me. So this is my first book, though, about Japan specifically. That's the difference. I've focused a lot on Brand America and on U.S. foreign policy. And once I moved to Japan in the last year or year and a half, of course, I had the Abe Fellowship. And this is a culmination of a lot of research, but also just talking to people, interviewing Japan experts, both foreign and, of course, the native Japanese, about Japan's role in the world, its credibility, its reputation. And, of course, I call it Japan's information war because I wanted to be somewhat provocative. And it's also riffing off of the title of my second book, just called Information War. And so this book is a series of essays, observational essays, reprints from a series that I've done in the Japan Times looking at nation brand Japan. And Tim, this is all new for the Japanese readership in terms of nation branding. That's something that is not widely used related to Japan. And I wanted to sort of lift the lid off of a really sort of closed door approach to how Japan is presented. It's run primarily by the central government with a few hand-picked people, and they have meetings and study groups. And I wanted to share with people what the narrative is, if there is one, the lack of sort of strategy around that narrative, and the need to really get the Japanese people more energized in this process, to see themselves as nation branders and public diplomats.
You know, you've been really deeply ensconced in Japan for for more than a year, and even before that during your fellowships.
That's right.
But you've been studying how things are done here, how they project their image, and you're actually known as Dr. Persuasion. You have an email address that says Doctor of Persuasion.
Right. Well, I'm Dr. Persuasion on Twitter and Instagram and also on Facebook. So my social media is integrating this background that I have looking at persuasion, social influence, identity.
Right. There are so few people that have that kind of skill set, and that's why it's so interesting to sit and talk with you. And you give speeches all throughout town. You're giving lectures. You're in Kyoto University of Foreign Studies as well.
Right.
And people love to go to your talks because you give such an interesting slant on how Japan, I mean, it's kind of marketing, but it's marketing at a grand scale, and the tools and the kind of tricks that are used to portray and to propel this image, I mean, they're just new concepts.
Well, one thing that I try to do in my talks is to say this is a perspective. I'm a highly opinionated person. I have made observations, which I write about. I put those observations out to the public. I'm not shy about that. But I also welcome people to either challenge me or to give their own opinions. So I'm doing two things. I'm providing content, but I'm also modeling what I think is an approach to communications, which is more of a two-way approach as opposed to just one-way sharing my expertise. And I also make it clear in the book, it's really for the Japan curious. It's not a book that is a deep culture Japan expert perspective. It's not a textbook either. It's designed to be a conversation or to start a conversation. So this book is just one of what I think will be many more to follow.
How did you get involved in this kind of national persuasiveness that countries kind of pursue at a grand scale?
Well, interestingly enough, it goes back to working during Bill Clinton's first administration. I worked in Washington, D.C. I went to graduate school in Washington, D.C. I earned a PhD at American University School of International Service, and then I immediately went to work for the federal government, the U.S. Department of State and the U.S. Information Agency. So I was put in a position of persuasion very early on. And I asked for extra work. As a bureaucrat, it was a lot of sort of pushing paper. And I asked if I could do some speech writing, and I asked if I could do press releases, because I believed very strongly that even though I was a federal government worker and I had a great position, I was being paid by the American taxpayers. So they deserved to know what we were doing. Within a certain degree, of course, I had a security clearance.
We don't want them to know everything, of course.
But it was unusual back then, Tim. This is 1992. Clinton was elected a month after I started my position in Washington. And so I spent, through the end of 1994, I spent 2 full years. And it was during that period, by the way, that I got invited by the Japanese government, the Prime Minister's office, no less, to come as a representative of the U.S. Information Agency and participate in something called International Youth Village. So all of this, I go into some detail in my book.
Right. It's kind of a new science, though. It's certainly a new science here in Japan, although people are practicing it. You were mentioning about a small group within the Prime Minister's administration that is pursuing this sort of thing, sometimes stumblingly so. But as I understand, you're the only person who has the title of a kind of what is the title?
Public diplomacy. I'm Pax Mundi Professor
you are
of Public
Pax Mundi,
Diplomacy.
Right.
Public diplomacy, there's no department here, there's no major in it, there's no certificate. And so what I just started teaching public diplomacy, but we are planning to have an institute, and we're going to do a lot more outreach to the diplomatic community, to the exchange community, and by that I mean person-to-person exchanges, because there's a ready resource of young people who are going across borders, who see themselves as global citizens.
Right, not even just here. I mean, you were in Korea, you were in China.
That's right.
You have a huge gathering of people who are just following you and saying, public diplomacy, what does it mean? How do we get involved? How do we engage the audience?
Well, I've never seen so much excitement for a subject, and I have a political science background. That was my undergraduate major. And then international relations is considered a subfield of political science. The issue, though, today is that politics is becoming, or seen as kind of a nasty sport. And I think for young people, they see the idealism in public diplomacy. Oh, you mean I, as a citizen, can be a diplomat?
An ambassador.
I can think about reputation, image, my role in communicating or translating one culture to another, talk about values and norms. And there is this idealistic part, but there's also an angle that I try to get across to the students, which is that this is a competition. And that's why, again, going back to the title, Japan's Information War, we're living in a part of the world here where there's competitive nation branding. This is about the bottom line. It's not strictly about how can I get to know you better and you get to know me better.
And it's not just limited to the guys, is it?
No.
That's one of the great things about it, is that it's really an open field where it's the art of persuasion. It's the art of taking ideas and kind of being able to convey them in a way that's easily understood or accepted.
Well, you know, the conventional wisdom is that women's strength is in communication. So when I worked at the U.S. Information Agency, it was predominantly female. When I moved over to the State Department on a rotation, then it became more predominantly male because that was policy. But communications and policy, when you merge the two together, you get public diplomacy. So it's always going to be policy-centered, policy-oriented reputation management is how I describe it.
Before we wrap up this session, Tell us about the book. You published it yourself. You took, what, about 4 months to write it?
Well, you know, I don't want to talk about my book.
No, of course not. I'm really interested because people want, it's not the kind of book that you can go to a bookstore and purchase.
Well, everybody out there in TV land can purchase it at Amazon worldwide, and it's available as a print copy, soft cover, and also as a download, so to a Kindle or an ebook version.
Okay.
This is my own enterprise this time, this book, because I just wanted to get it out there to be read. I've published with numerous publishers previously and with academic presses, but this is a direct book to the readers. And so far I've been getting good feedback, but it was just released 2 weeks ago.
That's right. How difficult was the process, this self-publishing, getting the cover design and the spell check and everything like that?
Not difficult at all, because I had some people encouraging me to go ahead and
you're surrounded by a lot of people that
Yeah.
really are following you and they're really excited and energized about what it is that you're trying to achieve. It's so unique.
Well, Tim, I think what helped is, again, when it comes to Japan, there is too much of a sort of an intimidation if you don't speak the language,
Sure.
and that's still sort of an issue for me. And so I also wanted to make Japan more accessible. And I think that I've accomplished that, but I was probably a little more nervous about this book than my previous books, because Japan is still a puzzle in many respects. But when I talk to people who've lived here for decades, they say Japan is still a puzzle. So I know I'm on the right track.
Right.
And I think you don't fully live and grab and embrace a place unless there isn't a little bit of mystery and a little bit of a conundrum. And so the puzzle that is trying to figure out what is Japan's story to the world remains. But as I say, I just open it up for review. And then I want people to let me know what their perspective is. So ideally, I'd like to make this sort of a living document and even maybe go online or do YouTube videos to follow to keep this conversation going.
Japan is very much like that, though, isn't it? I mean, the more that you study, the more you kind of discover as you explore the country or the culture, the more richness and complexity kind of comes out. It really never ends.
Well, like the kimono, there are a lot of layers here, and that's the real beauty of Japan. And ultimately, in the book, I dedicate it to the Japanese people because they're the greatest resource for Japan.
Right.
But even more so, it's Japanese women, because there's so much rhetorical lip service paid to women. And I think making women more equal to men in Japan will be a lifesaver here.
Japan's Information War, available at Amazon for immediate download. Please stay tuned.